Through the scope. This is Queez. Appreciate everybody's been rocking with the channel. Don't forget to support, subscribe, hit that like button. Appreciate you for watching the video. Had to turn the mics on real quick, man. As a fan of the W, one thing I noticed, at least for the past 10 plus years, one of the things I noticed in recent times is there been a downward trend in the development and talent that's in the league. Now, no slight to the players that's killing it now, right? You know, that's still killing it. The Brianna Stewarts, the Aja Wilsons, Sabrina, Lloyd, Jackie Young, Plum, so on and so on, right? All those players that still, Skylar Diggins, all these players that Brittany Griner, all these people that still put up numbers to this day, right? But we talking about new talent. Talent that's coming into the league, talent that's lasting more than 2 years. There's been a downward trend, at least for the past 5 years, going on in the league. And I'm trying to figure out, is the league sustainable as far as from a talent perspective if you're relying on 1 to 2 players coming into the draft each year to actually still be rotational players? Because if y'all look at some of these drafts that we're going to take a look at, it's like 5-6 players that's sticking around out of 30, 35, 36 picks. And out of those 5, you might get 1 star, you might not get none. So how can the W continue to pipeline talent? And what is the issue? What is causing this? What is going on? We're going to tackle all that today. So where I want to start at first with y'all is I want to take a look at the draft classes for the past couple of years. And I want y'all to take a look at what I'm talking about when I'm talking about from a talent perspective. Let's go to 2020. If you look at the 2020 draft and you look at some of those players that's on this draft, a lot of these players still ain't even in the league anymore. Look at these names. There's like 3 players in this draft that is still in the league about 5 years ago. 5 years, I guess, is probably the average in the W compared to maybe the men's. But only 5 players is still to only crack a roster. Now, we know the rosters are short. They're only like 12 people. They're carrying 12 instead of 15, which is what it should be. But only about 5, about 3 players is still in the league. And Shanetti should still be in the league. But, obviously she getting, her character has been kind of slandered enough with her attitude and all these things people saying about her. So even though she could drop 20 points at a drop of a dime, she can't find a roster spot. Okay. But you got these players lasting a year or two, and then they out the league completely. Now, just take this from a logical perspective. It takes more than a year or two to actually develop and hone your skills. Now, I know the 4 years that they're required to stay in college is supposed to do that, but you don't have those resources in college. You juggling all these other things, and unless you go into a top 6 program, you ain't getting that same type of development. If you ain't going to UConn, USC, and South Carolina, like if you're not going to these big schools, you're not getting the same type of development, 4 years or not. But if you look at this, how can you draft a person, especially in the top 10, give them a year, and then kick them to the curve? Now, the W has to focus on winning, right? I know it's a real strong emphasis on winning in the W. It's not a lot of teams. You're getting chances to draft players at high picks. Like, you're getting opportunities, so it probably looks worse if you're striking out on the picks for owners and coaches and things of that nature. So it's a lot of pressure to win in the W quick, probably compared to other leagues. But out of the top 6, only 2 are still playing, and that's Sabrina and Sabili and Satu. Sabrina and Satu are the only ones that are still playing. So if you got a draft like that, let's just say your team was the 3rd worst team or the 4th worst team or 5th, and you had a horrible year, you ain't get no talent out of that year. So it's just a wasted year. And what that means is the balance and power for that year probably didn't shift much. The teams that was probably great that year, unless any big free agency moves happen, they probably was still up top. And some of those lower teams really couldn't take that jump Without acquiring talent through the draft, that's really the only way you could build. Draft and trades. And a lot of times, if you ain't got the assets, because maybe you are a bad team, you can't build the trade way. And then if the draft is really weak as far as, talent, then you can't build that way. Let's go to 2021. The top 2 picks in the 2021 draft are not in the league. 1 and 2. In what sport have y'all ever heard that? Where the top 2 picks ain't even in the league. 1 and 2. Both flopped. Both of them, didn't pan out. And the Wings had the first and the second pick. I know it had to be some pissed off owners in that joint. And I know it had to be a pissed off. Like, if there was any silver spoon to build the team, obviously the talent got to be there. But if you get in the first and second pick in some of these stacked drafts, in the draft that just passed, you could get Paige and maybe Kiki or some of these. You could get some players like that. You salivating at that. But they got 1 and 2 and both of them out the league. Only one of the top 6 is still in the league. And only 4 out of the 36 are still playing. So 4 out of 36 players are still playing. Right? You got Carrington, who's doing her thing on the wings. You got, Natasha Mack. You got Dana Evans. And then you got the Michaela. These are the people you got these are 4 out of 36. How can you continuously develop and have a league that creates parity if the drafts are being filled with this? And we're going to get into that later on why, I think that 4-year rule hinders the WNBA. We're going to get into that later. But that's the 2021. You go to 2022. 11 players in this draft is still playing. So this is probably the deepest draft. Out of the 5 we're going to cover, this is probably the deepest draft. 11 players still playing. And most of the teams that was in the lottery, I think the lottery probably in the W probably like 6 since it's not that many teams, so probably like the top 6. And if you stretch that out to maybe like top 12, a lot of those players are still in the league. So that's a really deep draft. Everybody came away with a good, solid rotational player. That's an anomaly though. That's rare. That's rare. Go to 2023. You got 4 players still in that draft. So 4 out of the top 10 are still in the league. A lot of these players in this draft, just take a look at this draft here. A lot of these players only lasted 1 to 2 years. That is nearly not enough time to develop, man. You talking about 23-year-olds. That's not enough time to develop. Especially when you get used to these WNBA resources and it's like the gauntlet. Soon as you get in the league, you could get cut. We've seen it this year in prior years. Players that just got drafted don't even get a year. They just get a mini camp and they get cut. And you don't see them, they got to go overseas before they even get a chance. That is a severe problem. And obviously the W is working on that by expanding and things of that nature. But those are things that's going to take time. They can add a team every couple of years. But in the meantime, you have a stall in talent. Where knock on wood, don't want it to happen. But if you lose an Aja Wilson, or if you lose Caitlin Clark for 2 weeks like they just did, or if they lose who else is Kelsey Plum, or if they lose some of these other stars, Breanna Stewart, or they still got Sabrina, but if they lose some of these stars on these teams, it's now you're only banking with 6-7 good players, superstar players, right? I ain't talking about. You have other stars in the league. You still have Nafisa and stuff like that. She's a superstar too as well. But you still got other role players. But you can't afford to lose Nafisa and all these other players that's in that league. Now, if you go into the 2025 draft, the 2024 draft, 10 out of 36 players are still playing there. So, no really stars came out of that draft though. That's a lot of players that's still left in there compared to other years. 10 out of 36. But I've noticed no really stars came out of there but Caitlin. So again, if you took it for a team that's looking for a superstar, because that's what you're looking in the draft for, to just hit, you hoping to come away at least 1 superstar, maybe 3-4 all-stars, 2 all-stars, 3. But you only got 1 in that draft. Now, you got 2. Angel was all-star. So yeah, Angel 2 as well. But superstar, you only really got Caitlin, right? Now in the 2025 draft, this is new. These people just got drafted, so I'm not gonna really go into too hard, harp on that too much. But 2 of the top 10 didn't even make a roster. I think that's extremely concerning. If 2 of the top 10 don't make the roster, that just mean I just feel like they weren't given any time to develop, and you have teams drafting off of depth. Because if I only could carry 12 players, I need maybe 2-3 centers on. Like if one get injured, I'm screwed, right? I don't got enough roster spots to build a bench with depth on it. So, if you're not way above the options there, I got to let you go. So, I mean, you have a situation like that where they getting cut before the regular season. Like, so, I mean, they all have to do other gigs already before they even, reach their dream. You can get drafted into the W, and you can't even be excited about it. Because now the work just starts. You got to try to make the roster at least. More developed leagues, they have minors and minor leagues. They have G leagues and development leagues, and you could afford your time to get there. But unfortunately, the W is not there yet. So, the talent is pretty much lacking there. Now, we go to the development side of it. We got to start looking at it since you were younger, right? Since you first started playing. For boys, it's AAU. That's when a lot of people make their name. That's when they dominate the circuit, get themselves out there, right? So girls basketball for years has not been prioritized as much as boys basketball is, right? Boys basketball has been around longer. It's structure there. There's people put more investment into the resources that they get. They have players and things all the time donating gear for them and sponsoring them. They get put on TV. They get more exposure. And girls a lot of times they don't really put the ball in their hand and push them to play basketball and year round and spend their summers doing that and doing eat, sleep, or wake up to basketball. That's just not how a lot of girls are, conditioned to play the game and look at it like. So there's not a lot of time for development. Like the development there is just not as strong. You're not getting a lot of opportunities, a lot of games, it's just not a lot of resources there for them to be fine-tuned on a lot of skills before they get to college. And then college is all about winning. So they're not really going to focus on developing you there. And then you get to the W, it's all about winning. They're not really focused on developing you there either. So your development really start for them. It's supposed to start when they are at that age, that AAU age, that teenage years age. They don't get that proper development there. So you see somebody having layups wrong or can't make layups, or you see people that can't dribble that get to W. You can't make free throws, and you see that in the mental. It's not, it's not just one side too, but it's more talent in the NBA. It's a lot of it's a lot of people in there, a lot of funnels, a lot of players. So you could weed those guys out that can't do that. In the W, you really don't have the luxury of doing that. So that's probably why you see a lot of skills not defined yet, and they have to get those skills, learn them fast, or they're gonna be 1 a year or 2 done, right? I think we obviously know the lack of teams is an issue. I feel like people like Dasani Henderson and Tia Cooper, and I feel like just a lot of players shouldn't have been cut. I just feel like a lot of players should have been cut. And even if they're good in limited roles, like it's just not enough. They damn near got to average 15 to 20 in 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or that's the only look they're going to get. Obviously, they're expanding. Toronto's getting the team, and, they're probably going to add teams probably in another 4 or 5 years, another team. But to be honest, it's too slow. And I understand, revenue has to be there and all these things have to check out. But it's like these players are getting cut now. Like it's, you having talent that's getting wasted now, and your superstars are only getting older. So I mean, how long can you really wait to continue to add in these teams? I know you can't do 5 teams in one season. I get that, but you're having a talent crisis up until the meantime of that. where you're just seeing the same teams dominate. And if you don't have these superstars change teams, you're just going to be dealing with injuries, players getting older, retirement. Eladon retired, right? Now, good for the Mystics that Kiki looks like she's going to be a future star of that team. But if they ain't get hurt, like, who they really looking at over there? Nobody, right? So you had a team, and that's could continue to happen. Players getting older, if Skylar Diggins, retires, she's still balling, but she's getting older. She's probably going to retire soon. Then who they going to rely on Seattle? They already lost Lloyd. So what they going to do? Right? So, I see, you got to increase the roster size. Obviously it has to go to 15. At the end of the day, man, if you add some minimum salaries, you just need to get that roster to 15. You got teams like the Sparks. I seen Cameron Brink just talk about it the other day. They riddled with injuries. They carrying 9 players each and every game. And they don't really got the depth to compete with the teams at the depth that they playing with these other teams that they going against. So you're looking at a situation like that where like they already hobbling into the season. Like, you got to get the rosters to 15. You're able to retain more talent, hopefully develop more talent, and just allow players to maybe naturally heal from injuries. Now, I don't know if people are rushing back, because of, how small the roster size is and the teams need it. Every game matters in the W. They don't play that many games, so every game is crucial. So these are just some of the things I noticed, man. I just feel like, I told you I was going to double back to this. I feel like the 4-year rule for the WNBA actually hurts them. Now, from an academic standpoint, it's great for the ladies. They're able to get a degree, have a backup plan, because, again, the W is there's no guarantee when you get there. There's already no guarantee to make it to the league, but even when you make it, ain't no guarantee you won't be out of there in a year or two. So that's great for them on a personal standpoint. But for the league and their talent, I think it does a disservice to them. The reason I say that is the way the NBA is able to constantly get really like good players and stars and just funnel potential superstars and franchise players to the draft is when they're ready or their talent, they have extreme levels of talent and potential, they can go. You're almost guaranteed to have 2 players like that immediately once they start their first year. So you are constantly having players come in and out as far as from a potential standpoint. You're having superstar franchise players coming in and out. Juju would have been in the league a year ago. Now she's dealing with a torn ACL, and who knows how it affects her. But she would have been in the league a year ago. You would have already had her, Paige, and Caitlin and them all in the league dominating. And then in the following league, you have Olivia Miles and some other players like that. And it just continues with these players coming out the draft. And it's just each year you having a star get there. So it's more of a, you're just having the league gets filled with talent. Having them being there for 4 years, I don't really see it benefit too much the skill set because we still seeing players get cut. And we're still coming up with not that many stars coming out of the process and not many superstars being made. But I feel like if you allow the players that first year already hitting and running and they can come out the league, then you already are having those people continuously get on these teams that are low seeded. And now these teams at least have somebody who has potential and has the skill set. They're already getting the Juju. They're already getting some of these great players that have their confidence up. They're ready to go. And it's just more investment in those type of people than when you're drafting somebody at 5 or 6. You really ain't that invested in them anyway because you really wanted the one girl that was projected in the draft. And now you really got a short lease with her. I just feel like maybe you could do it to 2 years. 2 years is fine. One and done maybe might be extreme to go down to that. But I think 2 years allows them to constantly have a funnel of players leaving early to pursue their league, and get to the league. Now, the other side of that, obviously people get to the NBA because the money is a lot more. They're able to change their circumstances with their family immediately. The W is working on increasing the pay. It's not up to that level yet. So, the contracts aren't going to be life-changing. They're still going to have to, probably still live a modest life until they get past those years. So maybe that Might still cause players to stay in school, but the NIL is there. So for those players that are that good, they probably already making NIL money. You know, maybe coming to the W, they see the injury risk, you know, and now they want to go to the W. I don't know. I just think that 4-year rule might actually hurt them from a talent perspective, especially in recent times. They didn't always have this issue, but I think in recent times it's becoming more of an issue. And if this trend continues, you can't afford to lose some of these superstars at this point. You can't afford for Nafisa and Asia to get old, and you're just going to be relying on, you know, Caitlyn and Angel Reese rivalries, right? I think that's why that's so forced and why they talk about them all the time. They not putting their investment in nothing else. You know, Paige ain't there yet, but I feel like when Juju get in the league, the way she come in, they going to put investment behind her as well. I don't know. Let me know what y'all think, man. Do y'all feel like there's a talent and development issue in women's basketball in general, but is affecting the W? It's a little concerning. Let me know, man. But this is Queese. This is Queese. Through the Scope. Like, subscribe, comment. Appreciate everybody. I'm out.